Well, I am here with Debbie G. Debbie, I'm so excited that you are here with me. Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and it's been a journey just to get here, huh?
It has. We've had this on the schedule a couple times, and I was like, okay, what Debbie has to share with us is so important. I don't care how many hoops we have to jump through.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your patience so much.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a gal who was born and raised in Chicago.
Okay.
And so I have a lot of city edge to me. But we moved to a suburb, and that's we have a family that was we've heard people say that there's dysfunction in families.
Yeah.
Well, dysfunction is usually a generational thing. And so we had a lot of dysfunction, and the basis of our dysfunction was a lot of violence and a lot of codependency. It's like people saw what was happening, but no one would do anything about it out of fear. So at a very young age, my brothers and I learned how to take care of ourselves in a way that was usually quite physical.
Okay.
And so we just grew up learning what we had learned. And then we started also recognizing that not everyone lived this way. So there was a lot of shame put on top of that as well.
Wow.
But, went to school, somehow got through school, went to college. And in my heart, I always wanted to be able to give women and children a voice, because I felt in our home, we did not have that. My mom didn't have a voice, and us kids never had a voice either. So that was always something in my heart that I wanted to do. When it came to God, because I am a very strong believer now.
Yes.
I love my Jesus. But back in those days, it was like God did not exist. And if he did, he wasn't very loving, and he wasn't very kind. So that's basically a synopsis of the way we grew up.
Yeah.
I thought the church was filled with hypocrites.
Wow. Okay, so that means there must be a journey that got you from there to here. And one of the things that I've heard you say that I think is amazing is, and I even wrote it down. You said, if you don't tell all of your story, then God doesn't get all of the glory.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times there are parts of our story that we hide. It's like, I will tell all of my story except this part and this part because that's embarrassing, or I myself feel shame for that part. But that's not the way you are. You're like, here is it all. I'm not going to hide any of it. So can you tell us, what did that journey look like, going from that point to where you are now, loving your Jesus?
Well, I think that, being brought up in a lot of codependency and a lot of violence, just felt abandoned and all of that things. You're looking for love in all the wrong places. I had a very good, strong work ethic. I was always successful at work, but I was terrible at relationships. And I was an addict. I was drinking like crazy, and I was a high functioning addict.
Okay.
And so when the Lord got a hold of me, and he did. I had married and came to Arizona because I really felt that's what I was supposed to do. Even as a kid, I wanted to live in Arizona. But I ended up getting divorced and moving basically right back to where I was. I have two brothers who have committed suicide.
Wow.
So that's just a little bit of what happened to cause two of your three brothers to choose suicide over life. And it was very hopeless in a lot of ways. But the Lord is, he is good. I look back now and I could see that he was wooing me for many years before, because I was like, I ain't following you. I ain't doing this. But there was always something spiritual within me that I knew things that I would think I wouldn't have known. They were just part of who I was. Like, I had to fill out an aptitude when I was in high school. And I found it maybe 10 years ago. Now, I have been out of high school for a long, long time. And the response I received after doing my aptitude test was clergy. And I'm thinking to myself, that's crazy.
You're like, God, you knew.
I was the furthest person from the church. It was like,
Oh, wow.
So I purposed to stay away from people who were from the church. But the Lord was wooing me, and I knew that he was. When my first brother committed suicide, I was devastated, and the way I handled it was a bottle of pills and a bottle of booze. And I had very good friends who said, you're going to die if you keep this up. And they coerced me to go see a grief therapist.
Okay.
And of course, for those of us in denial, it's like, I'm fine. I don't need no help. And this guy just had a way with presenting his help that was just very safe. And I remember trusting him, which I don't trust anyone or didn't. And coming to experience, he allowed me to experience my childhood with all of its trauma in whole, without judgment. And he sat with me and he wept with me and he walked with me through this.
Wow.
And that was a game changer for me. But I also wanted to know, where did my brother go?
Oh, wow.
He's dead. Where did he go? And I had Jehovah Witnesses that were there for me because my brother was. We have Jehovah Witnesses in our family.
Okay.
So I had people that were very nice to me, but the easier thing for me to do was just go back to old behaviors. Okay, this checked me off. I'm stronger. I understand things more easily about myself, but I'm just going to go back to doing what I do because I didn't have a community around me at all. Well, the Lord moved me and was wooing me. And I remember being in Chicago at a newer job and that had no booze. And every job I've ever had, booze was part of the job. So I would be able to drink on the job.
Okay.
It was just ready and accessible.
Yeah.
So here I'm at a new position now where I'm not allowed to drink because there's no place to drink. I'm out in the sticks somewhere. And I made an off-the-cuff comment. Well, since there's no bars around here, maybe there's a good church. And I'm like, I can't even believe that came out of my mouth.
God's like, thank you. I've been waiting for you to get there.
And within moments, there's this tall, older man standing in front of me going, I hear you're looking for a church. And I'm like, where the heck did you come from? I was shocked by that. And so he said, my wife and I would be happy to take you to church, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like astonished by this whole moment. So I took the card and I'm like, I'm a big girl. If I want to go to church, I'll go by myself. Because that's who I was. I don't need nobody.
I don't need anybody.
I got this. So I did decide to go to church about 3 months later. And I walked in. And I sat behind a gentleman. I'll never forget. I don't remember what the pastor looked like. I don't remember the sermon. Don't remember music. Don't remember anything. But I do remember this man in front of me just saying, thank you, Jesus. I praise you, Jesus. Just thank you, Jesus. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I've never heard that. So I went home and I had an audible voice say to me, I want you to follow me. And I was like, no way. I ain't following you. So I went off. Thank goodness for the grace of God.
Yeah.
Because now when I think about it, it's a little bit more scary than when I was doing.
I said no to God.
And I just went off on him. I was like, where have you been? It's the questions that everyone who has been broken and hurt want to know. Where were you?
Yeah.
And so he never answered me. He just kind of said, I need you to trust me like this much. And I use this, and for the audience, is basically what I'm doing is putting my two fingers together, and you can't see through it. And basically the Lord said, I just want you to trust me this much. And that began the relationship. And about 2 weeks later, he made it very clear to me what my life was going to, what I was going to have to give up. Not what my life was going to look like, but what I was going to have to give up.
Wow.
And that was like your drinking, your party, and the sex, which was just like, oh, really? This is all I've known. And about 2 weeks later, I took a knee in my home, and my family thought I joined a cult.
Yeah.
Because I was transformed. I was a Saul Paul kind of a conversion.
Wow.
I was radically different. And just really fell in love with the church that I came to know the Lord in.
Wow.
So that's the beginning of my journey.
Yeah. When you're saying like it became clear what you were going to have to give up. I guess in my mind, when you said that, I was like, oh, so she became a Christian and then God was like, this is what you're going to have to give up. What you're saying is it became clear what you were going to have to give up and then you still became a Christian.
Yes.
So you knew walking into it, this is what sacrifice looks like.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of Christians have the opposite story. It's like they become a Christian and then they're surprised almost when God says, I need you to sacrifice this, or I need you to, surrender this part of your life.
And I think that was really a little bit of a challenge for me because I thought everyone came to know the Lord the same way I did.
Yeah.
And so it was very difficult for me to not understand why people who had been in the church for a longer time than I was, weren't like, why are you doing this? What don't you really love the Lord? Where's your passion for him? Why are you doing these things? It was very challenging for me. And then I had, some people say, Debbie, your conversion is not like most people's conversions.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. So I need to like give people grace the way I was given grace.
You were so sold out. Did you ever were you a part of a church that really just continued to encourage that, I don't know, that excitement, that passion that was within you?
I did. And so when I remember for the gentleman who introduced me to the church actually was a deacon at the church that I was going to attend. So he brought me in on a Wednesday night because I was going to church like Wednesday, Sunday morning, Sunday night. I was a church girl.
Got it.
And so I remember him saying, oh, I'm going to go to a meeting and I'm going to leave you with some people. And that petrified me. Mm-hmm. Because for those of us who have come through some real messed up lives, we feel like you can tell that we're not a church person like you.
Oh.
That's why a lot of us have a hard time going to church because we don't fit the mold of what church people look like.
Yeah.
But he put me with a group of younger people because I was younger back then. And they just started talking about what the Lord had delivered them from. And I was like, okay, I can talk my stuff in here, because they weren't just saying, not gossip or things like that, but they were talking about, drugs or pornography and stuff like this. And I'm like, okay, I feel like this is where I belong. Mm. And our senior pastor just had a heart for me. So it's like God said to them, you need to help this woman. And they did.
Mm. Okay. I have a question, but I'm going to save it for later. I want to talk about your organization. And in fact, you're wearing the shirt. It's Beyond Fear to Freedom.
Yes.
And so BFF is what you guys use as your abbreviation, which I love. Can you tell us about the organization, what your mission is, and who you serve?
The mission is to expose lies that we have believed as truths. Mm-hmm. Because the enemy is great with doing that. I believed lies my whole life until I came to know the Lord. Mm-hmm. And then our goal is to have transformation happen within small groups and change. If we can get the parents to understand their behavior patterns, then they can go ahead and make some changes, give it to the Lord, and then be able to go on and serve the next generation with wholeness. Mm. My parents were a mess, and it's not their fault that they were a mess, but what they taught us was their messed up life.
Yeah.
And so once we understood that this was very generational and that we had believed lies, you're not good enough and you're stupid and all these kinds of things, it just prepares you for failure. It just does. And so we try to do the opposite. Satan is the father of lies. So let's talk about the lies that he has poured into your life all this time.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and put the truth next to it and let's talk about it. So we believe that we have behavior patterns that are rooted in some type of something. I didn't decide when I was old enough to think for myself that I am going to choose to be an alcoholic. My brothers, I'm certain, didn't decide that when they woke up, I'm going to choose suicide over life. Mm-hmm. I think things happen to us which ignite behavior patterns and thought processes.
And sometimes things we don't choose either.
Right, injustices that are happening. And so we talk about these things, and we just get real raw and real at BFF.
Yeah. So who is it that you are serving at BFF?
Well, I would like to go back just a little bit. So I did prison ministry for about 9 years.
Okay.
And so when I started doing interviews for these women, I recognized, wow, most of these women are not criminals. Yes, there's a few of them, but every single one of them have some brokenness that's deeper than just their criminal activity. They're not criminals. They're hurting women.
Wow.
And that was the process, how the Lord brought me to digging really deep as to why we do what we do. Why do we continue to do what we do? When I was in the world, I could stay sober for like 3 weeks, but after that 3 weeks was over, forget about it. It's like being on a diet.
Right, right.
Here comes Christmas. Well, or there's chocolate cake. Well, Mm-hmm. And so we give in, right? Yeah. It's just easier to give in. And so starting BFF, it was like, okay, this is This is the group of women that God has called me to love and to disciple and to cherish. And through that ministry, I saw reconciliation with children. It was ridiculous, the miracles we saw. So I came into this ministry knowing the power of God and what he could do.
Yeah.
So when we started it was like, you know what? Nothing is impossible with our God. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never started a ministry. I have no clue. I'm just going to ask the Lord to help me. And he certainly has, because we're going into our 8th season of BFF, which is tremendous. So the group of women that we started to serve, we started to actually want to go into the church first. But the church met us with, we don't have those kinds of problems.
Wow.
Really?
Gosh.
And so after a couple of years of trying to really minister to the church, the Lord said, okay, hit the streets. So that's what I did. And we grew when we hit the streets. So we have 3 transition homes that come to us. We've had women who have served us through churches, meals and things, and they're listening to what we're talking about. Women who have been divorced or whatever, they're empty nesters, where they're like, wow, this is like some real stuff I don't think I can talk to about at church, but I can find a community here. And now we have the church engaged with us as well, and they serve us because I think they've recognized, wow, this is a community worth serving.
Yes.
Yes. There's a lot of people, and I'm not saying anything against what a lot of people do. There's a lot of homeless, and there's a lot of people serving the homeless, which is great. But where's the people helping disciple, single moms and raising their children and sitting with them and trying to figure out, okay, what's the best move here? Or just to say, I'm here to love you. And it's very challenging because we get dirty. You're in the dirt with people.
Yeah.
When I used to go to the prison, it's always a joy. People just like, oh, prison ministry, it's so much fun. And it is. When you're working inside. You come outside and now you're dealing with real life issues with these women who have never been sober or had a child with them as they've journeyed this life. Trying to be a follower of Christ or even try to understand yourself and your trauma can be petrifying to them and sometimes quite overwhelming.
Yeah. I just wonder, as you're working through building this ministry and you go to the one place where you're sure that you can get support and then there isn't any, which unfortunately there's scriptural backing for that. That happened to Jesus. He's like,
yes.
The one place that I don't get support is in my hometown. What did that feel like to you, and how did you work through those feelings?
I think I was a little bit surprised at maybe just the lack of knowledge for some of the people in the church. They've come to know differently now. Yeah. Because dealing with trauma and PTSD has now become a part of the church culture. Yeah. So I think we were just ahead of our time. And so I knew that the woman sitting next to me was a woman who was raped. I knew that there were women in the church who had abortions. Whether the other people knew or not, I knew. Yeah. And so now it's something that talks more. It was challenging for me because we are a body that says we want to serve and we want to help. And yet when you're looking for it, it's very challenging to find it. However, that's not true with all the churches. Right. I had some great backup because I had people who were in prison ministry with me, and they're like, hey, I'm following the bus that you're on because it's fun, it's exciting. Our ministry is a blast. I mean, you don't come here and go wah, wah. It's a lot of fun, but it's extremely real. And the women who are our leaders, and that's what I want to see. I see in people what they don't see in themselves. Like someone saw something in me that I didn't see. Yeah. And so my goal is to see what they don't see and help others see what they may not see, and then raise these women up to be the leaders that God has called them to be. You know, we have a very unique way of discipleship. You know, we talk about our garbage, and people are raw and they're authentic and they got tattoos all over, and some are coming straight from church, some are, you know, in their work clothes. So it's a very eclectic group of women. I don't want people to think, oh, I'm going to walk in and there's everybody's like from gangster land. No, that's not true. We have women from all walks of life at BFF. But we really want to raise them to be leaders. Somebody's following them, even if they're going to be a leader in their own home. Your children are watching you.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
And then most of our table leaders are now women who have gone through the program because it's a 2-year program.
Wow.
And they're now giving back what they received, and they're still learning about themselves. And that's the one thing that's so great about what we do when we follow the Lord is that we're always learning about ourselves. You know, that search my heart, oh God.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just say that once and think you're done. I say that every morning. Lord, I know who I am. I know how I can be. Please search my heart. Because if there's something in there that it's not honoring to you, I need you to reveal it to me because I want to make certain that you receive glory from the way I choose to live my life.
So when you're looking at and bringing women in that want to disciple, that are like, yes, I feel like God is calling me to disciple these women that are on or that are in Beyond Fear to Freedom. It sounds to me like it could maybe be a little scary. Like people would say, I'd love to help, but like, I don't know anything about that. And, you know, I've never been to jail and I wouldn't know what to say. How do you help ladies be in a place where they can really respond to that call that God's giving them in their life?
I'm glad you asked that because that's a common rebut we get. It's like, I don't know anything. I've never had that kind of thing going on in my life or anything like that.
Which is why I think a lot of churches are like, I've never seen that here. I don't really know how to respond to it. So no, thanks.
Yeah, it's so much fun for me to watch when a person from the church comes in. 'Cause it's quite funny to me, actually. Because I have had women who have come from the church and said, I'm here to help serve. I want to be a table leader. And so I watch it. You don't become a table leader just because you say so. I watch you first. You have to come and watch what we do. I want to see that you can really be able to do this because there's no judgment where we are.
Yeah.
So sometimes women will come in and they're just like, or they hear their stories and all they want to do is cry with them. And so we need women who are actually going to be able to like hear their story, have empathy, but not stay there feeling sorry for them.
Okay.
Because the church is good at feeling sorry for people who have had it hard. You know, so we don't want to be that. You know, we feel sorry enough for ourselves. We don't need people to join our pity party.
Though some of us that like gift of mercy is like way low.
Oh, it's hard.
We're not in that place, but we do have to connect, right?
Absolutely. So, people who come in with gifts of mercy, I'm like, oh my goodness. You can help pray with them at the end. We'll never get through the study tonight.
That's right. Oh gosh. So you do what to help train them?
Well, we ask them to come and just sit.
Okay.
Come and be a part of a table.
Wow. Okay.
And actually, the women who have come in, every single one of them have, and it's true, every single one who's come in and said, I'm here to volunteer for you, have said, oh, I need this more than I thought I did.
Wow.
Because it allows you to unpack some of the injustices, some of the name calling, some of the generational patterns, some of your own choices for open door sin. We're a really strong discipleship community. You know, we talk about recovery and healing, but we have a very strong sense of discipleship. And I'm really proud of the fact that we have so many of our women who are really strong believers who have come in through addiction. And just say, wow, look at this. And they're the ones out there praising Jesus and really inviting people to do something.
Yeah.
We've taught them not to be pewsters.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, just don't sit in the pew.
Yeah.
Anybody can do that.
What is the difference between like being a part of a recovery program or something like this where you can talk through some of your issues and then a discipleship program where you're also recovering?
So I had started to celebrate recovery in the church that I had once attended. And so I'm all for recovery programs, but they only take you so deep. And you're really not building community. Your steps are over and you can go. Or you become so involved with your community that you're not really moving in discipleship.
Okay.
You're just like friends now. And so I noticed that for myself. And one of the things that we made purposefully is to make certain that you don't get judged. We're on your side. We've been through it too. God is great and he can heal anything. But unless you know his word, unless you know his promises, unless you've grown deep into the soil of Christ, you will not be able to stand when things come and hit the fan.
Yeah.
And I have that for myself. I mean, my life is filled with tragic events. And if it wasn't for my deep love of Christ and his deep love for me, I would be all over the place. But he has put me on a firm foundation. So we want to offer something that is not loosey-goosey. You know, this is the answer, people.
Yeah.
He is the answer. So let's understand it more fully. So when things do happen, because that's the greatest issue we have, is that people have disappointment in their lives. They don't know how to handle it. And then they go and they do some stupid thing.
Something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not on their knees looking for, the love of God and his strength. It's like, okay, I tried that. That was stupid. Look at these people. They're doing. And so we're trying to let people understand that you need to renew your mind.
Yeah.
When you renew your mind, you have a different mindset. Everything else will follow that. That's the way we learn. It's by the renewing of our mind.
Wow.
And so it's a pretty strong discipleship. We do it backwards. We do community first. We serve a meal. We let the kids come in. They're running around like a bunch of lunatics, which is great because a lot of kids that come don't have that opportunity. We've got tired moms, and they don't want to watch their kids. And we have kids who have made friends that are friends for 8 years now.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And I think people just connect because they're like, wow, I can love Christ and I can be a mess too.
Okay. Yeah.
I can be in that process because I didn't just come to know everything overnight. It certainly was a process for me.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for the people who loved me through my process.
But that's what we need. We need someone who's going to love us through our process. And I think a lot of times people don't have that, or they don't trust that if they really took that mask off and revealed who they were, they don't believe that the people around them would actually stand with them.
Absolutely. Because we're so filled with the lie, I'm so ashamed. That's why when I get up there every Friday, and God bless my husband, he's like, are you going to tell him everything? I'm like, yeah, I got to tell him everything. And I tell on myself every time I'm up there. Because if I will tell on myself, that gives everyone else permission to tell on themselves.
That's
Even
true.
if it's the beginning of telling on themselves, And I do believe unless we tell all of our story, he will not get all the glory. So that's one of the things that we teach our women. It's like we gotta work through all of it. There's no shame in this game.
Yeah, no.
The Lord took that from us. So now we're just showing off how awesome God is.
Wow.
Because there's no shame in this game.
That's right.
And it's the practicality of living that out in community.
Okay, so I'd like to ask this of anyone who loves discipleship as much as I do. What is your definition of discipleship?
I would say my definition of discipleship is just walking with people through life and just always leading them back to Jesus. I mean, first of all, my life has to, I've seen people who disciple people and then don't do life themselves well. That's the hypocrites that we were raised with. And so when I disciple, I always want to make sure I'm right.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes a way of life now. And I think it's just became a way of life for me is discipleship. It's taking people by the hand and saying, I'll walk with you.
Yeah.
I'll show you how to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know how to be a Christian. Well, neither did I when I started, but look at God.
Yeah.
But look at God, the transformative power of God. A lot of getting into the word though.
Yeah. So getting into the word, I loved how you said, like, you have to know his word and you have to know his promises. Because at the very beginning, you mentioned and you were talking about your mission about breaking the lies that people have. And if you know his word and you know his promises and you know his truth, then that fights against the lies that the world is trying to tell you about who you are.
Absolutely.
Or even the lie of, if you reveal this part about you, you will be rejected. No one will love you anymore.
Yep. It's so awful.
Yes.
What you've done is so awful.
So then it remains a stronghold in your life where Satan can continue to poke you and prod you. And therefore, maybe, now you are ineffective for the gospel because you're so scared that someone will find that out.
Yes. And I think that's really a struggle with the church anyway, is because we're always trying to have this persona of like, I live for Christ and I can struggle too. Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
You can.
Don't have to be
You look
perfect.
at the 12 disciples, you'd be
Yeah.
like, okay, look at those boys. Okay.
Right? The more I study about like the disciples or some of the comments that they had to Jesus, I just think sometimes Jesus must have like rolled his eyes.
Oh, I'm sure I'm sure he's rolled his eyes at me a couple. Girl, how many times are we going to have that conversation?
Right, which makes me feel better about like when I do something and I'm like, oh, God's got to be like, come on. Didn't we learn this a long time ago? Did we learn that lesson?
So funny. It's so funny.
But it's, it's helpful, I think, sometimes to see that they were right there with Jesus and they made mistakes and they doubted and they said stupid things and had to apologize and had to go back and fix their mistakes. And I'm like, okay, if they did that and they were with Jesus,
Yes.
then I know that it's okay that I do it too. Now, we had a whole bunch of questions and we're not talking about any of them because I am loving this conversation that we're having.
I'm glad.
So I wanted to ask you about when we're talking about people hearing about your ministry and thinking that sounds like something I want to be involved in. Now, your BFF is here in Arizona.
That is correct.
But maybe it's something, maybe they don't live here and they're thinking, what do I do? How do I reach out to this population, of women? How do I start a ministry, or how can I reach to women that don't have a place where someone can be honest with them?
Well, we used to do, and it's very interesting, and Facebook doesn't like us so much. So we used to do a Facebook like separate page for us, and we keep getting censored, and so we're closed down on that right now.
Is that because of the truth you keep talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do, and so I would suggest we have a website, and we also have a Facebook page. That there's a contact place to reach out. I love to talk to people. My goal in life, part of one, is to help other ministries start and flourish and help them so that they can help other women.
Awesome.
Because that's what we are supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
And so I love being a part of that. So just reach out. Reach out and touch me. I'll be happy to call you back.
That's awesome. What is your encouragement to a woman who is on the other side of the coin and is like, I have these things and I need to talk about them and I don't know what to do. What's their next step?
Well, I would say if you live in Arizona, you should be coming to BFF. I just think that you should. BFF is actually for every woman, and we're now bringing men into it as well. So we have fathers who want to figure out, wait a minute, I was raised wrong, and I want to make sure this is right. So we have a small population of men as well. And I think part of the reason is that we want women to see that there are healthy men.
Yeah.
Our ministry is run by couples.
Okay.
So they can say, oh, I guess there are good men in this world, and that's what one looks like, and that's the way we're supposed to be treated.
Wow.
And so it's important for the male role model to be there.
Yeah.
But if you live in Arizona, I strongly suggest that you be a part of it. And we also have a subscribe tribe that we can also include you in just our studies.
Okay.
I've done some really important, for me, I think, Zoom meetings with some people who are like really on the fence about like what life's gonna look like.
Yeah.
And parents even, like my daughter's getting out of jail or prison and I don't know what to do now. So will you talk with me? So as much as we can give what we have, we certainly want to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But if you can't be here, I think it's really important that you find a recovery group or start one yourself. If people say, well, I think we need this. okay, well, obviously you think we need it, so why don't you talk about starting and being overseeing that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't mind starting BFFs wherever.
Well, I would say that probably you're not going to get the answer from Debbie G of, well, just, I mean, if you want to, you're going to get
No.
you're going to get the answer of, well, it certainly sounds like God's leading, so maybe you
Yes,
should
ma'am.
step out and be honest with yourself and faithful to what God's encouraging you to do.
I love that you said that, because I have heard from people, oh, God is so nice and he's so kind when he answers me. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm from Chicago. I don't get that kind of response too often from him. It's like, hello.
Well, I think God has been gentle sometimes with me, but then sometimes I agree. I think
Yep.
sometimes he's just like, well, this is the truth. Are you going to accept it or not? And I'm like, gosh, okay, there's no beating around the bush, I guess, here, God.
Yep.
So,
But I want to also encourage people to be thinking about what our next generation is going to look like. Our whole goal is for generational change.
yeah.
We look at our society today and we have so many wayward children. Young people who are just wayward without a purpose. There's no absolute truths. They don't know what to think of themselves. And we have parents who are exhausted and probably don't even know what to do either. So if we can speak truth, even if it's a seed for the next generation, we must be about doing God's work in that place.
What does that look like for us that have young kids? And we're like, yeah. I mean, I know I was just talking to another mom and I said, I just want my kids to be like nice and like, a good person in society. And some days I doubt my ability. How do we do that?
I think it's funny because we have so many parents, especially when their kids are like young like this. I mean, you're just training them, right? You're just, how do I make this little person be exactly what you just said, right? And your example is going to be that. I remember growing up and my father would say, do as I say, don't do as I do.
Yeah.
But I'm going to follow and I'm going to do what you do. I'm not going to do what you say. I'm going to do what you do. And that's the wonderful thing about Jesus, is because he not only said it, he did it.
Yeah.
And I think we need to see our parents actually model the behavior they expect from their kids.
Yeah.
And if we don't know how to do that, then we need to go figure out a way to find out how to become that parent. And so, with our community, we have a lot of women who are either getting their children back for the first time. They don't even know how to parent. Some of them have so much guilt in their lives, they just enable their children.
Yeah.
Because they want their kids to like them. And that's the worst thing you can do for your children. But just know that you are the greatest role model for your child. So what do you look like? What are you modeling?
And it sounds to me like seeking health for yourself. It just because your life has been hard or you've made poor choices does not mean that's the end result of your life. And that is the example that your children will see.
Yeah, it doesn't negate your responsibility before God at all.
Yeah, but instead, the best example for your children could be the transition that you're going to step into, and for your kids to see how hard you fought to break out of that addiction or break out of that shame, so that you could be the best, mom and the best, daughter of Christ that you could be. And that could be a huge example to them. And
I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the things that we do is we have parents who don't have their children yet. Or they've been, somebody else has got custody of them.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, they're going to probably come looking for you. And so what are they going to find when they find you?
Wow.
Are they going to find a person that's like, wow, this person is awesome and I'm so glad I found you? Or, wow, what they always said about you is true.
Yeah, that's, I guess, and that's probably hard for parents that don't have that child yet. Because there's probably a sense of like, well, I've already failed.
Yeah.
And instead what you're saying is that's just, no.
No. And I have testimonies of that. I have a testimony of a lady who gave her child up at birth. And that was the only child she ever had. And I just said, you don't understand the power of God. And when he turned 18, guess who he went looking for? And he found a healthy woman.
Wow.
And now they're reconciled. I mean, I'm going to cry right now.
Seriously.
And now she's a grandma, and she never thought this was ever going to happen. This was never going to happen. And I was the first person she reached out and said, guess what? Because God is waiting for us to experience his goodness. But if we won't get in step with him, then we're just we're even negating our own promises that he's given to us.
Yeah.
We're basically like saying, no, your promises are good, but not good enough for me. It's like, whoa.
Yeah. What I'm sure that you have, because you've worked with many different women and you've seen many different stories, I bet you've also seen many different sides of God and who God is to them and to you. What have you, discovered about God as you have walked with these women?
I've discovered that he doesn't, there's no favoritism. Like one person's not better than the next. Working in prison, everybody's an orange.
Yeah.
So you don't know who's got the education and who's got the money and who doesn't. And on God's field, we're all level.
Yeah.
There's no one's better than the next person. I'm not better than you. We all come together trying to do the best that we can. So I've seen God meet us all where we're at. And that's great, because some women think I'm not good enough. There's no way. No, he meets you where you're at.
That's right.
And I've seen God really chastise some women and then give a ton of grace to someone else. I've seen him minister through the children to get to the parents. I've seen him come through with miracles financially that no one ever thought was going to happen. I've seen families been restored. I've seen marriages come back together. I've seen women put boundaries up where they never had a boundary before. And I've seen God in my own life. Dennis is my husband. We've been married for 26 years. He's a stroke victim. His life is very challenging. Our life is extremely challenging. And one of the things that I am able to say with absolute confidence is his grace is sufficient.
Wow.
And to be able to say these to these women and men, and for them to see our lives, they have no choice but to say, wow, for them, his grace is sufficient. Why can't it be sufficient for me? Well, you need to take a knee. You just need to take a knee.
Yeah.
And we'll show you how to do it one step at a time. He's good and faithful teacher, isn't he?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think even listeners now they've just listened. They're already amazed. And now they understand that you're a caretaker, for your husband and she can still talk with this much confidence about the greatness of God. I think it's amazing. If people want to contact you, you said Facebook group, is that the best way to get a hold of you?
Beyond Fear to Freedom on Facebook is great. Our website is beyondfeartofreedom.org.
Okay.
We're very interactive, and we would love to chat with you. Yeah, we're looking for all kinds of people. So
hey, so if you're in Arizona and you're looking for a place to serve, that's a great place. I think also one of the things that you said, that you have seen all of these things. I just want to encourage listeners that if you are not involved in ministry somewhere, where you are really, truly plugging in, it is, it becomes a part of who you are. I encourage you to find that place.
yes,
Because what you're saying is, because you chose to say yes to creating this ministry, which you had no idea how to create.
that's right.
Because at some point you said yes to going to the prisons, because you've said yes to stepping into the dirty parts of women's lives and not just the nice parts. Because you have said yes to God, God has allowed you to see all of these ways that he's working, which then allows us to see the great and big God that we serve. And if we don't say yes to that, and we just kind of think, I don't have the time, there isn't the space. I know for me, every time that I have been involved in a ministry in the way that you have, God works. God shows up. And then I get the blessing of watching him work. You think you're there to bless them.
Yeah, right?
And you are the one that walks away changed.
Absolutely. One of the things that I look at and I see in lives is, where's the joy? give back to me the joy of my salvation, I think is like one of the most important scripture verses that we kind of like don't pay attention to. Because if we're not filled with joy as we serve our God, something's missing. And I would just encourage people to ask themselves, am I filled with joy? You know, life's not easy. Life is challenging for us.
Yep.
For many people. But it has never stolen my joy. I still have my joy because I have my Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? You can have the whole wide world. Just give me Jesus. And he is, in fact, enough. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that we can teach one another is that he really is enough.
Wow.
He really is enough. And he is a good and faithful Father.
So we have to know that ourselves. We need to learn if that lesson, if that doesn't ring true, that's a good starting point.
Yes.
Do you believe that Jesus is enough? Have you really thought, is Jesus really enough for me? And then when you meet with others, you can see, do you think Jesus is enough?
Yes.
Because I'm seeing that you think it's Jesus and.
Correct. Absolutely. Jesus and my job, Jesus and my kids, Jesus and my house, Jesus and my ministry, Jesus and. It's not, no. Just Jesus is enough.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, Dennis and I should not even have a house because
Really?
of all the bills that we had when he had his stroke. And yet God saw fitting to allow us not to be homeless.
Wow.
But if we would have lost anything and everything, Jesus is still more important than any of that. And God would have found a place for us to live.
Yeah.
But he chose not to. No, you're just going to stay here. I'll take care of the rest for you. And I think when we understand that when we're faithful, he loves to be faithful back. You know, he just loves to be faithful back. He's like,
right.
watch what I can do. I love that. I anticipate, wow, what's God going to do?
It's such a great way of looking at life, I think. Like, what are you going to do next? Because, you know, oh my gosh, this is exciting. Instead of kind of like, okay, well, but see, what are you going to do next also is a perspective on God of he is a loving God. You know, if you look at it as he's a judgmental God, then you're going, so what are you going to do next, huh?
Absolutely. I remember that.
Yeah. And so you look at God with this loving perspective of you are here to you love me so much, and you're not here to just judge me or tell me everything that I'm doing wrong. So I love that.
God is love, right?
That's right.
And we think love is a feeling.
Yeah.
And it's really not. I think when I understood that, it just changed everything about the way I live and the way I look at things. Because God does love me very well.
That's right. Well, so we have one question that I ask all of our guests, and I can't wait to hear your answer. So because we are meant to live in community, we're not meant to walk this life alone. Who is it that has helped you in your journey?
I'm going to say, and I've had many, my very first pastor. And I have a specific reason why. Is that he told on himself while he was in sin. And he had this big, beautiful church. I mean, he was a very strong man of God. And he was in pornography. And he told on himself.
Wow.
And he was taken off the pulpit. And him and his family got counseling. And it probably took 3 or 4 months, maybe longer, to get him back on the pulpit. And during this time, his church family stood around him and the church grew.
Wow.
And then when he was finally redeemed and put back on the pulpit, he got on his face and his knees and he asked us for forgiveness. And that has been the greatest example of leadership that I have ever experienced in my life.
Wow.
And I will never, ever forget that. And in fact, I think of that often when I am stepping in to lead or to teach. I share that story all the time.
Wow. And that's you see that in what you're saying of like nothing is worth hiding.
Correct.
We have to tell all of our story.
We have to tell all of our story. And if he could tell on himself, you can tell on yourself. He thought it was more important to, even if he had to lose his church, to be able to be authentic with his people, authentic with his family, receive the help that he needed so that he could be restored into wholeness and then presented back into his position. There it is.
Wow. All right, listeners, now you see why I couldn't. I was like, I don't care how long it takes. We need Debbie G here.
This has been fun. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for your story and your honesty and, the ministry that you do for women here in Phoenix. And I will be praying for
Thank you.
and for Beyond Fear to Freedom, that it starts to creep outside of the Arizona borders and people are seeing this and wanting to see it replicated in their city and in their state. So thank you very much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure, Courtney. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.